Well, hey, Becoming Me, I am so excited to introduce you to Ben. Ben, welcome to BecomingMe.tv.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm super excited.
I'm excited to have you here. It's been fun reconnecting on social media. We're from like the same town and it's been a couple years. So before we dive into your story, I would love to kick everything off with maybe the hardest question that I will ask you today. And that is, who is Ben?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I like the way it's even framed, right? Because I was talking with somebody just recently about how especially men, usually one of the first questions you ask another man, like when you meet, is like, "What do you do?" And I love the question of like, "Who are you?" Right? Because it's so much broader than that, or at least it should be. Some things that I thought would at least be kind of like fun facts. I am a fifth generation Floridian.
That's
Which is
awesome.
where we obviously know each other from, the home state of Florida. I live in Nashville now,
Yeah.
but I still get to spend a lot of time back home. My mom still lives 4 houses down from my sister in Ocala. And,
I love
I'm back
that.
there quite a bit for personal and for work stuff. Um, but yeah, I grew up in a couple different small towns, North Central Florida. Since then, I've bounced around, lived in North Carolina a couple times, lived in Philadelphia for a few years, and now Nashville. Um, and then I'll cover some of the kind of the logistical basis, and then I guess that'll help us get to the real kind of meaning behind who I think I am. But I've had an opportunity to work on like a few different cool things,
Okay.
which I think are helping me to reveal still kind of who am I based on like if those things are feeling like they're pulling me closer to who I'm becoming, or sometimes there are even things that got in the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I worked in full-time youth ministry for 4 years. I worked in politics, worked on a presidential campaign and for a U.S. congressman and state representative for a few years. And now I do leadership consulting. So in the consistent thread that I've kind of noticed through all that, because eventually I'm like, how are all these things going to connect? Right. I mean, and it was just recognizing that like everything is about people,
Yeah.
right? That like there's, I mean, there's like the expression, nothing significant is ever done alone,
True.
right? And so it's just recognizing that you can have the best idea, the best intent, the best strategy even, but if you don't have the right people to implement, if you don't have the right relationships, the right connections, the right focus and intent, I mean it's likely not to come out. um and then another part of kind of my story, I guess, is that's helped kind of make me who I am. Was I grew up in a family of there was five of us. Older brother was in and out of the house, but there's five of us in my immediate family, and three of those five were permanently disabled.
Wow.
Um, so yeah, I kind of grew up with a little bit of a I want to say like chip on my shoulder around like kind of having to grow up really early and try to figure it out and be the problem solver in the family or whatnot. And so that's something that I still kind of, I guess, carry with me, around just like feeling the need to like try to provide or protect or, um, you know, uh, yeah, want to like look out for those that can't look out for themselves kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's probably some context around
That makes
who I
sense.
am.
So are you oldest, youngest, somewhere in between of your siblings? Where do you fall?
I was the youngest of three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
Man,
it
that's
was my two older siblings were two of the three that were disabled. So yeah, it kind of I was the youngest, but not the littlest, I guess, if you
yeah.
will.
No, I'm tracking with you. So two other questions from about you, and they totally go with cliches about the cities that you've lived in. So I kind of
Sure.
apologize, but not really. So Philadelphia, are there really like the best Philly cheesesteak sandwiches there, or is that overrated?
Yeah, I haven't seen the demographics of your viewers to know how many people I'm gonna offend right now,
Oh
but I'm gonna be honest. Philly cheesesteak isn't that complicated, right? There's only a couple of things that go into it. So now there are some good ones and there are some bad ones, but I will say there's a few that in Philly that are really good, but they're probably not the ones that people go to the most, right? Pat's and Gino's, Pat or Gino, if you're listening to this, I apologize. Kind of commercial, they're like the famous, well-known one for the tourists to come and see. My favorite's probably D'Alessandro's up in Roxborough, just outside the city.
Good to know. That's cool. Okay,
Mhm.
second question. Nashville. Are you a country music fan?
I am. I am. I joke because I'm probably the least talented person in this whole city, because everybody here is really creative and good at stuff and usually really musical or artsy, and that is just not me. But I do love music and appreciate music, especially country music. And that was part of what led to the move to Nashville, was just a culture that felt like it was
Yeah.
more suiting to like my preferences. um, but it's cool because it can be, a Tuesday afternoon and you walk into a bar or restaurant and there's going to be somebody playing live music, and they're going to be really good at what they do.
That's
So
awesome.
it's just a cool part about Nashville. There's so much life.
I love it. No, that's really cool. Well, I mean, you alluded to a couple parts of your story, and I would love right now for you to just take the time to unpack your story. Like, what has made Ben who Ben is today?
Yeah. So like I said, grew up in a small town where it was actually, it's called Crystal River over on the Gulf Coast. And my great grandfather was the first mayor of Crystal
Hey,
River. Yeah, back in like 1903 or something like that. Um, but by the time like I came along, a lot of our extended family had kind of moved on, so it was just our immediate family. And uh, a lot of the stuff started when my dad had a stroke when I was like 4, and uh, he then had heart issues kind of for the rest of his life, and for most of my like childhood and upbringing. And that caused a lot of challenges. We struggled financially a lot of those early years. My parents still did, pretty significantly for most of the remainder of my dad's life, who passed away last year. Um, and so that was kind of a theme, was like, kind of appreciating the value of a dollar, recognizing that like stuff's not just handed to you, you got to kind of figure it out. And But a very like, loving home. My mother's a saint. She's one of the best people on this planet. um, just very gracious and selfless and giving and thoughtful and spirit filled. She's just, I idolize her. She's amazing. And But then when I was right before my 12th birthday, I found my older sister passed out on her bathroom floor one morning, and we rushed her to the hospital and found out that she had a brain tumor, and had to go into emergency brain surgery. And I remember, and it's funny because like, I went through all of this, but it's not until like years later that you kind of unpack things, or like when you try to introspect or reflect or learn to see like you start to recognize the role that certain things played in your life that maybe you didn't realize in the moment. Um, the things that it's almost like who you're becoming is like in the moment, but a lot of times you have to look back and realize, well, that's how I became, right?
absolutely.
And so that was one of those things for me. Because looking back, I remember thinking, because I like didn't have a 12th birthday basically, because it was the day of my sister's surgery, and I was with my brother who was grown and out of the house, and um, in a different town than where the surgery was going to be and everything. And I remember thinking my dad was already sick. My mom, would do her best to try to make ends meet or whatnot, but now she's taking care of my dad and my sister, who's going into this massive surgery where she only had a 50% chance of survival anyways.
Wow.
And I remember thinking, okay, like childhood's over, right?
Wow.
It's time to grow up. And it wasn't like a sad moment. It was just like, okay, that's kind of what you do, right? The opportunity is there, you step into it and figure it out. And now looking back, I recognize like that did have kind of a pivotal role, where like it's like the thought process and like psychology, that things that you had to do as survival as a kid may not be required in order to survive as an adult. So you have to learn how to like turn back the dial some,
Mhm.
right? And so for me, like I became really like kind of serious and like intense, and like, just like get it done, like win at all costs, like whatever it takes. So whether that was sports, whether that was school, whether that was, started working when I was probably 13 or 14, whatever it was just, you just put your head down and you get it done. And as I became an adult, that really kind of took a toll in some areas of life where I had to kind of recognize that I was getting in my own way, right? That same strength that I had at one point that helped me kind of get by in certain situations, the overuse of a strength creates a weakness,
Yeah.
right? So I was leaning too much on that, and it was actually holding me back or getting in the way. And so when I was for graduation, I went to a really small school, but I was like class president, so I had to speak at graduation. I remember my sister was in the hospital during graduation, so she couldn't be there. My dad was fighting a ton of illnesses, and so I just remember it being kind of like a decision period when I was like right around 18, heading into graduation, on what I was going to do next. And um, I decided to stay in town and just help my family and start working. So started working full time right after graduation and just kind of put myself through school nights and weekends or whatever I could afford to do. And I thankfully got offered a job working at a church there in Ocala that was associated with the school I went to, and it was a great experience. Ended up being there for several years, working in youth ministry and college ministry and a few other things. But part of that story too was I did what a lot of small town Southern people do, and I got married 2 weeks after my 21st birthday.
Wow.
And like now living in cities like Philadelphia and Nashville, people are like, "You did what?" But like that's kind of what you do in small towns. You grow up, you try to build a family as quick as you can.
Right.
And looking back again, that's another example. Like I didn't realize at the time, but looking back, and we were married for about 4 or 5 years, and never thought I was going to be divorced, but that's just kind of how things unfold sometimes. But now looking back, it's a perfect example of where I hadn't learned how to turn back the dial yet. Right. I was still carrying that like intensity and, just like drive and focus, which again can be a strength, but it's all about how you apply it, all about what you do with it. And so that's an area where I still constantly have to work on, right? I'm still a pretty intense person, right? I'm a D on the DISC assessment,
Right.
8 on Enneagram, like whatever, personality assessment test people like to use. So I could still be really intense, but that's definitely something I'm working on and paying attention to. And so, the, rest of the story would just be, like I mentioned some of what I've had a chance to do, but, now I am at a place where I get to be a part of growing this company that we're working on. And also recognizing that there's more to life than just business, right? There's more to life than just accomplishments or the metrics that you think. So
Wow.
sure that's probably something we'll get to. So there's a lot of context. I don't know if that's too
Oh
much
my
or too
goodness.
little.
I already have a couple like follow-up questions I want to ask you. And I want to start with, are you a coffee drinker?
I am.
Okay. How do you drink your coffee?
Black.
Best way to drink it. Great.
It
Okay.
is.
So you're having a cup of black coffee with somebody and you're trying to encourage them on their own becoming journey to be who God made them to be. What would you say?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that there are a few things in life that are like one size fits all.
Yeah.
That there's like a silver bullet, and if you just figure out that one thing, it answers every question about what you need to be. So I think like there's a lot of areas of scripture and of faith that are very clear, very black and white, right? There's undeniable truth, but there's also a lot of areas where even that truth can be applied very differently in different people's lives or in different contexts, right? I've never been a big fan of like hypothetical questions because it's like it's not real, right? I mean, like if it was real, I might answer it very differently than I might in a hypothetical.
Right.
But the concept of like, how do you kind of guide somebody through that? I would initially start with just, are they spending the time with God? Are they pursuing walking in the Spirit, spending time being fed by the Word, spending time in prayer to really feel like they're hearing from God? Because you can do all the right practical self-help things you want to do, but ultimately, if it's not, coming from the voice of God, it's still going to be lacking, right? There's still going to be a lot of room for human error. But thankfully, we also serve a merciful, gracious God. And I do believe that he gives us a lot of free will to choose our own path, because there's a lot of different things we can do that can still serve him.
Mhm.
And there's areas where like he needs us to do something specific to accomplish something specific. But I think there's also a lot of areas where he knows what we're going to do, but he's still okay with us choosing a lot of different routes to get there.
Yeah.
So I think for me, answering that question for somebody would kind of just start with learning about their context, learning about their situation, and
Mhm.
then trying to help make sure they're actually hearing from God. And one other thing I'll mention too, I remember one of my mentors when I was younger shared this with me, and it's always stuck with me, that when you're trying to make a big decision around like, do I go A, B, or C,
Yeah.
rather than sitting and waiting for peace, right? Or waiting to be led towards something. Don't be afraid to like take a step towards an option and then see if you feel peace, or
Yeah.
take a step towards the other option and see if you
Right.
feel peace. Because sometimes, I mean, when you're just stationary, it's tough to, have just a door open,
Right.
right? And so,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think it is definitely that combination of like, you know, not being afraid to take action, because there are a few things in life that can't be undone, or that are going to haunt you forever. But then also like having grace for yourself, that life's not always easy or simple, right? It's super complex, and there's a lot out there, and just try to put the one foot in front of the other and make each
Yeah.
decision you can.
Well, that's really good advice. And, something you mentioned in your story was turning back the dial and really looking backwards and seeing maybe some of the things that you need to unbecome to become who God made you to be.
Mm.
If somebody was listening right now and they're like, how do I even start? Like, what does turn back the dial mean? How do I do that? What are some tangible ways that someone can turn back the dial in their own story?
I think I think a lot of it starts with taking the time to really, I'm a big believer in like beginning with the end in mind, right? So like craft out almost who you want to be,
Yeah.
right? Not always like what you want to do or whatnot, but who you want to be. What do you want the end goal to be, and how does that align with what you feel like God's called you to be? And then kind of take inventory of where are you now, right? What are the areas or categories even in life that are kind of getting in the way? I often think about like the analogy of like a GPS, right? Whether it's on your phone or in your car, it needs to know like where you are and where you're going. And
Yeah.
once it has those two coordinates, it can give you turn by turn directions. But I feel like so often we either get caught up in one or the other,
Mhm.
right? There's people that are dreamers that just think about the future, but
Yeah.
don't ever reflect on where are they today. And then there's people who are like so critical and perfectionists even, or so introspective that they spiral and don't think enough about, well, each step still has to go towards the direction that you're trying to go in. So I think thinking about both of those things hopefully helps to reveal some of those areas that you could focus on.
No, that's really helpful for sure. Because it's so easy to, whichever category you fall in, you do get stuck. You're either stuck dreaming and you don't take those steps of action like you talked about, or you're stuck just introspecting all of it and you don't take steps. So being able to put both of those plots in like the GPS map, that's a great analogy. In beginning with the end in mind. I love that. If somebody was watching your story and they wanted to connect with you online on Instagram, social media, follow your journey, where could they connect with you?
Yeah, Instagram is probably the platform I'm on the most. LinkedIn's an easy way to get a hold of me too. And if any part of my story kind of resonates with someone, or if you have questions, or even want to just talk through, or hear more, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to encourage wherever I can.
Absolutely. And you guys, we will have all those links in the show notes. You can easily connect with Ben. Ben, thank you. Thank you for sharing your story, who you are, who you're becoming. I'm cheering you on big time. And I just thank you for sharing today.
Well, thank you, Emily, and likewise too. I mean, having the platform to be able to do this, I'm sure you're having an even bigger impact than you ever even realized. So that's awesome.
Thank you.